All right, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for a Paladin vs. Rogue TBC guide? I'm a little tired right now. I'm also a little sick. So I'm just going to try to get my thoughts out as best as I can on this particular subject. Most of this information has been gleaned on the Endless private server, where gearing options are extremely limited. So this and other factors might change in actual classic TBC for a variety of reasons. So you're only going to find probably about 80% of this information useful in actual classic TBC. But is what it is. This should give you a really good idea of a baseline of where to start from, and you can watch some of my other videos where I'm actually dueling rogues, and sometimes I die, sometimes I don't. Really, it depends on if they're cheating or not, or if I'm making bad plays, and yada yada yada. Okay, so to begin with, I think I want to look at this video over here because we're going to be talking about all the abilities the rogues have and their cooldown timers and so forth and so on. But at the end of the day, it really only boils down to these few things we have to take note of. Like, 2 evasions, 2 sprints. Why do I got 2 evasions twice? One second, let me pause the video and try to figure this out. Okay, it's supposed to be vanish, not evasion. Yeah, can you tell I'm a little tired? So all it really boils down, the only things you really need to keep track of as a paladin is, more importantly, it's keeping track of PvP trinket cooldown timer, Cloak of fucking Shadows, the blinds, and maybe vanishes will come into play at like the higher levels where they have one or not. Sprints are a big thing to kind of keep track of, but aren't super important. By far the biggest thing to take note of against a rogue is what kind of poisons are they using, but we'll talk about that in a second. So, to begin with, one of the major differences from classic World of Warcraft to TBC is the fact that rogues actually can use their poisons, and their poisons do not fuck around. And the reason for this is because they can very easily get this ability here, which gives their, let's see, poison. Yeah, it gives their poisons like a 40% chance to resist Dispel. And because of that, it's virtually pointless for us as a paladin to even try to dispel the poisons. So they can have things like 5 out of 5 wound poison on you, and then they can get like mind numbing poison on you. That's pretty bad. Usually they'll either use double wound poison and mind numbing, or wound poison and crippling poison. Slow your movement speed. And we'll talk about you have to play a little differently depending upon what poisons they're using. Other things of note is that they can blind you, but if you notice preparation over here, they can't prep out another blind. However, they can and they do reduce the cooldown of their blind by something like 90 seconds. So they only have like a 1 minute 30-second timer between blinds. And what this means, also, blind is a physical spell now, not a poison based spell. What that means is that you can bop Blessing of Protection. Is viable against rogues. They can't blind you when you're Blessing of Protection. So basically, it works kind of like you can trade with the rogue bop or bubble for blind. But if you're not trading with the rogue bop or bubble for blind, then you're probably gonna die. That's one of the key features. So the rogue is going to open on you, and he's going to try his absolute damnedest to get you to bubble without a bubble or bop without him actually having to use a blind. If you can avoid that, then you're good to go. If you can't avoid that, then you're up shit creek without a paddle. It's going to get really ugly really fast. The other interesting things about the whole blind 1 minute 30-second cooldown is when they do blind you, it's really hard for the rogue to not dick around for a long period of time. Like, I kept expecting it to be like classic World of Warcraft, where they could blind you and then blind you again. And I always wondered why these rogues were always dicking around after they would blind me. And I'm like, dude, you should force out the bubble as quickly as possible, and then blah 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 blah. But instead, they they blind you, and then they bandage, and then when the blind wears off, they sap you, and then they eat a bit, and then they sap you some more, and then they eat a little bit more, and then they'll let you run around a bit, and when they see you going for a heal, only then will they step in and try to mess with you. And the whole purpose behind that is they're actually kind of just wasting time to try to get to their second blind, which is something to take note of. The other thing to take note of is the fact that Cloak of Shadows is a new spell that they have. It's annoying as shit. It's got a 1-minute cooldown, and it'll be used primarily in conjunction with the PvP Trinket. And this makes a combination of these two makes your stuns really hard to deal with. Other things of note, if I can find a paint here, is just how horrifyingly high Rogue's mitigation is naturally. Let's see if I can find this stat here. Yeah, it should be over here. So in the PvP, in general PvP gear, and this stat can fluctuate depending upon the situation, like, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But if you look at Rogue down here, you can see that they've got almost a 35% dodge chance in their gear, just naturally, and then like a 5% parry chance. What's worse is there's like an ability that they can use. It's like a type of attack. Let's see if I can find it here real fast. Serrated blade, no, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, there's an attack they can use that increases their dodge chance. Maybe it's this thing. Yeah, Ghostly Strike. Increased chance to dodge by 15% for 7 seconds. Awards 1 combo point. Usually rogues don't. They can take that, and there's something else that allows a rogue to get combo points if they dodge your crap. Yeah, this thing right here. Now, this is not typically... These talent points are not typically what rogues get, but if a rogue has taken these talent points with you, if he's using things like Ghostly Strike, and then he's got setup on top of that, things can get really ugly really fast as a Paladin, especially if they're using Evasion. But even if they're not using Evasion, the sheer act of trying to hit them, just giving them combo points, basically out their ass. So... something to take note of, even though I don't think I've run into it, but every time I struggle with rogues on the private server, especially as like an Argent Defender Paladin, it's usually because they're teeing, but if they're not teeing, I'm wondering if they're using this whole I get combo points when I'm dodging type thing, which could be a big deal. All right, what else is interesting to take note of here? I think Sprint reduces... or removes movement impairing effects from a rogue, but I couldn't find that definitively, but I feel like it does. I know Cloak of Shadow removes negative effects on the effects increase. Let's see, instantly remove all existing harmful effects. Because Sprint removes like movement impairing effect crap, and then Cloak of Shadows removes all magic impairing effect stuff, it's really hard to stick a dot on a rogue or to get like... judgment of lingering anything to stick on a rogue. So you're usually better off just trying to judge damage into them if you judge into them at all. One big important thing to note in the duel is you need to understand the difference when Evasion is procced and when Cloak of Shadow is procced. So Evasion makes a completely different sound than Cloak of Shadows. Cloak of Shadows makes more of a like a wah sound or some shit like that. And Evasion, you know, makes the same sound that Evasion has always made. So, basically, when you hear Cloak of Shadows go off, you're not allowed to throw out any stuns. You're not allowed to judge any damage on the target. You can still do anything else you want to do to them, no problem. When Evasion is going off, you can swing into them if you suspect that they don't have the talent points that they're gaining combo points off of dodging your attacks. If you do suspect that they have that ability, then you might not want to be even swinging into them when they have Evasion going, but they're 50% plus, you know, their natural 35% chance to dodge is like, okay, yeah. So they're going to have long periods of time. They got 2 of those. They're going to have long periods of time where you just absolutely cannot hit them. Vanish is its own thing. They also have, the last thing to make mention of is they've got Shadow Step, which allows them to instantly cover, like, you know, 25 yards. Why is it 25 yard range? Attempts to step through the shadows and blah, 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 blah. I do believe that, yeah, they can use it at 25 yards, but I don't think Shadow Step actually travels 25 yards, if that makes any sense. I suppose I can go test it out really quick here, because I would kind of know if it was 25 yards or not. The other thing to note is that Sap Range on the Rogue has been spec'd to be 5 more yards than normal. So their Sap Range is actually, what the hell is it? Their Sap Range is like 10 yards, which is absolutely, literally insane. Let's try to find a target dummy here. Let's see if I can Cloak of Shadows anywhere. Cloak of Shadows. Should be in prep, right? Subtlety? Yeah. I don't want Cloak of Shadows. I want Shadow Step. Shadow Step, okay. T. Roger that. Okay, let's see when I can and cannot. Okay, so I can't use the thing. Can use the thing. Oh, fuck, it is 25 yards. Okay. Pfft. Holy crap. Yeah, that was fun. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, so I guess I can't explain what I'm about to be talking about here in a second then. Yeah, so they can Shadow Step 25 yards from one target to another. Maybe they can't do it while they're vanished, but I'm pretty sure they can do it while they're vanished. You can see dirty tricks here. Increase the range of blind and sap abilities by 5 yards. That's pretty intense. So they can stay outside of your judgment range and blind you now. They can stay outside your concentration range. Consecration range is 8 yards, and they can sap your ass. And it's just a bad time. Bad time. So the good news with the Paladin is that we technically have 2 bubbles on a rogue now, as opposed to just 1 bubble on a rogue. And more than likely you're going to have to use your 2 bubbles on the rogue. But let's talk about general strategy now that we've looked at all the abilities. Did one of these just delete? Don't be a dick. Okay. Alright, so the first thing to take note of when you're fighting any rogue is what fucking kinds of poisons are they using. Because depending upon what combinations of poisons they're deciding to use will kind of dictate what tactics they're planning on using during the fight. And you're going to have to respond differently with each kind of tactic. Oh, there's one last thing I actually want to talk about, and that has to do with kick right here. So if you notice, kick actually costs 25 energy and interrupts the School of Magic for 5 seconds. Yeah, 10-second cooldown. That's also a big kicker. But it's important to know that rogues regenerate 10 energy every a second in 2-second ticks. So every 2 seconds they're getting 20 energy. So it's actually a little hard for them. They would need 4 seconds of time if they were completely out of energy to generate enough energy in order to kick their target. So sometimes you can get off flashes of light just because they're not able to get any energy back. Like if they let their energy drop virtually to 0 and you go for a flash of light, there's a 100% chance you're going to get off that flash of light, no problem. The big deal here, however, is that whether you get the flash of light off or not, the kick energy cost is so extreme that it's like you healed anyways. So it's actually a really good idea to try to weave in flashes of light into your Paladin rogue combat conditions. There we go. Or maybe your rotation's a better word. So when you're fighting a rogue, your combat rotation, try to look for where you can go for a flash of light and force the rogue to kick you. If you're in concentration aura, which is actually, believe it or not, superior to ret aura, don't use ret aura unless you have improved ret aura. You should not have improved ret aura, by the way, ever. Concentration aura ends up being better against rogues. And the main reason for that is because there's no pushback while you're going for that flash of light, which means the rogue has to kick you and he has to spend that 25 energy, and your School of Magic will be locked for 5 seconds, which can be really bad, right? Because you might be using GCDs on other things. Like, you might need a GCD for a Judgment. You need a GCD for a Judgment every 8 seconds. You need a GCD for a... well, technically, you don't need a GCD for a Judgment every 8 seconds. But every 8 seconds, you need to be judging. Every 8 seconds, you need to be consecrating. Every 10 seconds, you need to be doing a Holy Shield if you have Holy Shield. Or every 15 seconds, you need to be doing a Holy Shock. One of the two, right? Or there's a Crusader Strike in there somewhere. So you will have a window of opportunity where you do not mind being... you do not mind trying to cast a 1 point... you have 6 seconds of free time before you have to do anything again, is what I'm trying to tell you, okay? And in that time, you're like, well, if I go for a flash of light here and he kicks me, that's not a big deal to lock my school of magic for 5 seconds. If you have improved concentration aura, or if you're using a breaker amulet neck piece, which also might be a really good thing against a rogue, then this 5 seconds gets reduced of spell lock time gets reduced to like 3.5 seconds of spell lock time. 1 second, let me take a drink of water. Yeah, 3 seconds of spell lock time. 3.5. And 3.5 seconds, notice this thing has a 10-second cooldown, right? So if I get kicked and 3.5 seconds later I start going for more flash of lights, this is going to force the rogue to start having to spend energy on other things they might not want to be spending energy on. They probably want to spend their energy more on damage, but now they have to stun you or garrote you or just let kidney shot you, or just let the heal go through. And but in general, you're just doing it because you want them to kick you. To be perfectly honest with you, you get it's worth the heal either way. So lately, I've been I'll give you an example of this. So lately in my videos, I've been having a really hard time dueling against rogues, and I've narrowed part of the problem down to the fact that I've been going Retribution Aura and still trying to heal, and I've been getting kicked. And then I'll get kicked, and of course, I'm not judging damage in that amount of time. I'm not consecrating in that amount of time. I'm not casting holy shields in that amount of time. It's really bad. And as it turns out, I was just better off before when I was using improved concentration aura, and they would kick me. And 3.5 seconds later, I'm able to do whatever the hell I want, including going for more heals. And the rogue's like, hey, fuck. Turns out that it's actually better if you have improved concentration aura to be an improved concentration aura than ret aura, and to do those little flash of lights here and there. I'm pretty sure that's superior. You can go test it if you want, but that's what I'm sitting on. Okay. All right, so the first thing I have to mention when you're fighting a rogue is something that rogues try to do that you absolutely cannot let them do. I've come to this conclusion. I put out a video recently on my Paladin called More Holy Reckoning. You can go check out this video. But in this video, I end up dueling, and it's very close to duels, but I end up getting beat over and over again by a rogue that he's teeing, which you're not supposed to do in duels. But even when I know he's teeing, I'm still not able to really deal with him, and I eventually tracked down the fact that I'm not able to deal with him to the fact that he's dicking around a lot. Yeah, this is the guy Prophets. So here's a perfect example. Okay, so the thing I'm going to describe is the rogue will attack you for a while, and then they will fuck off for a while and let their energy regenerate at about a 15-yard range from you. Now, they can shadow step 25 yards, so I have no fucking clue why they insist on sticking around for like 15 yards away from you, but you're going to see this in a matter of a moment. So he'll tango with me a bit, and then he runs away. He's waiting for his energy to come back up. I decide I'm going to go for some heals. He's like, nah, man, I'm going to let the energy do its thing, and then he should be right back in on you, right? And what I've discovered is that you cannot let rogues do this. Let's see if he does it a second time. He was doing it a metric shit ton. So it's like, I think he's got evasion up right now. I know he's got Cloak of Shadows on for sure. Cloak of Shadows should wear off right about now. So that must be evasion, not Cloak of Shadows. And he has to use up all his energy before he'll fuck off. Okay, so he's going to run away. Blind. Okay, that's fine. That's a different story. Don't you love that private server shit where I'm like, oh, fuck, wrong way. Where did he go? Oh, crap. Love that crap. Weird little bug. But anyways, that's just an example. So what the rogue will do is they'll attack you a bit, and then they'll stun you or CC you or silence you, and then they'll run away. This yellow line represents your judgment range. And they'll stay right outside your judgment range and wait for their energy to come back up because they know you can't really do anything to them. If you're a Holy Shock Paladin, then you can easily punish this, right? Because you can just shock them at range, no problem. So if you're a Holy Shock Paladin, they tend to stay out past, like, 20 yards, which is the range on your Holy Shock, and then they dance with you a little bit, and then they'll shadow step back into you, and, blah, 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 blah. But what they're basically doing is they're coming in and they're using up all their energy, and then they're fucking off until they get their energy back up, and then they're right back in on you again. I've eventually come to the conclusion that you absolutely can do whatever it takes as a Paladin to not let them do this. So in more recent duels, what I've been doing is when they're dicking around out here at this range, the moment I come out of the silence or the stun or whatever the hell, I'm freedoming myself, and then I'm running at them. And this usually depends upon what type of poisons that they're using. So if they're using a crippling poison, I'm going to have to freedom myself and then just straight up run at them. If they're using any other type of poison, then you don't have to freedom yourself at all. You can just kind of just straight up run at them. But then there's other abilities that they have. They can do like a ranged throwing attack, deadly throw, which will slow you for a few seconds. It'll also interrupt any healing. That costs them their combo points though. That are on you, so it's worth it. It's worth it just by the sheer act of running at them if they have to throw, use up their ranged ability to slow you down, and of course then you free them out of that. So they're going to have the ability to slow you either way, but the goal is that you just, it's not about the energy so much as it is you don't want them to get back into a free stealth, and you do not want to, you totally want to punish them for this tactic of trying to stay at range and get their energy back. So if their ass is out here, then you're 110,000%, move it out there, you're just going to want to literally come out of the stun, turn around, charge at them, and you move faster than the rogue. You've got about a 7% increased movement speed on the rogue. So the rogue has to try to slow you, or you're going to be able to get the judgment on him before he can. He'll either have to vanish, which is fine, or he'll have to use a sprint, which is also fine, or the rogue will have to deadly throw at you, which again consumes all their combo points and will slow you for like 4 or 5 seconds, I forget. But you can freedom that off and then continue chasing them down. And the goal is basically to force them to use something, right, in order to get a free re-stealth, right? So you're forcing them to either use a vanish or a sprint or something in order to get the free re-stealth. Once that happens, you can then go into trying to heal yourself. Typically what it looks like, however, is you close with the rogue, right? So you'll very quickly close within the rogue and you'll get a judgment on them. And because your judgment's on an 8-second cooldown and it takes them 10 seconds to get out of combat, they can't re-stealth for free anymore, and they'll either vanish or sprint to get the re-stealth, or they'll shadow step right back on top of you and start attacking you again, stun you, and then run out and try the thing again. You just need to do your absolute damnedest to punish them. As a Holy Shock Paladin, it is much, 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 much easier to punish this type of playstyle that the rogues like to use. The key indicator that rogues are going for this playstyle will be a choice of poisons where they have crippling poison. If they have crippling poison, then you can pretty much be assured that they are in fact going to go for that type of playstyle. If they do not have crippling poison, then there's a good bet that they're not going to try doing that particular playstyle quite as much. It doesn't change the fact that if you see a rogue just not fighting you and trying to get their energy back for long periods of time, that you should just freedom yourself and immediately run over there and start blasting them with judgments at a minimum. Or if you have Holy Shock, just lay into them with Holy Shock at range and blah, 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 blah. One second, let me blow my nose over here. Okay. Alright, so what else is there to talk about? You do not want to trade a bop or a bubble until you get a blind. The moment you are blinded by a rogue is the moment that you're pretty much safe to bubble or to bop or bubble. When you bop is very circumstantial, more so than bubble, because you really want to bop and start healing when wound poison is off of you. But it's usually not that bad because again, a rogue will blind you. He'll bandage himself for like 10 seconds, and then he'll sap you, and then he'll start eating and drinking, right? And if we go back over here, we can see that wound poison, I think, only lasts 15 seconds. Yeah, so 10 seconds of the blind, and then he saps you, and then he starts eating and drinking. Because usually they are low life, so there's plenty of time to let this wound poison fall off of you before you bop and you start going for the heal. And you can see that in some of my videos as well, where I usually look at wound poison and then the situation to determine whether or not I'm bopping or I'm bubbling, kind of a thing. What else is there to talk about? The duel is very long. It's one sec. I gotta go to the bathroom all of a sudden. That's when you can tell you're an old man. Damn, this is not what I want. I want this. Okay, so let's talk about the matchup from the word go. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen, of course, is that the rogue is going to open on you. Drink of water. Better. All right, so the first thing that's going to happen is the rogue is going to open on you, and he's going to do a bunch of damage to you. He may or may not be stunning you in the opener. It's really hard to say. You're almost always silenced at the beginning of the opener, so even though you can move and do things, you can't cast any spells, which really sucks a dick. The very first action that you need to take as a paladin, and this is absolute top priority, is you immediately need to turn and face the rogue to get block, dodge, and parry in effect. All right, you have to turn and face the rogue. You don't have a choice. Turning and facing the rogue will usually involve you flicking your mouse, right? Like me, for example, I think I jump up in the air with my space bar, and then I press down both mouse buttons, so that usually makes my character move forward, and then I flick my mouse to turn around, right? You know, do the whole jump, turn, spin thing. People who use their mouse button predominantly for turning, it's the exact same motion. The reason why I bring this up is because you kind of need to do two things simultaneously the moment you can take any action. The first thing you have to do is you have to turn and face the fucking rogue. The second thing you have to do is you actually have to tell your character to start auto-attacking the rogue, despite the fact that you're silenced, right? So you can't exactly judge damage into the target immediately and then get your auto-attack going that way. What else is there? Oh yeah, you also don't want to judge damage into the rogue immediately, because the rogue might Cloak of Shadows on you, and then your judgment is just gone. So a rule of thumb is that if Cloak of Shadows is up, you're not throwing anything that is useless into it. You're not judging into a Cloak of Shadows. You're not throwing any of your stuns into a Cloak of Shadows. If Cloak of Shadows is up and you have nothing better to do with your Paladin, just try to go for a Flash of Light, make them kick you. Because Cloak of Shadows, again, is going to last 5 seconds, and it lines up very well with the kick. You know, like an increased chance to resist all spells by 90% for 5 seconds, right? That's kind of get fucked. So you don't want to throw any spells into that, so if you're like, I immediately throw a stun into a Cloak of Shadows, that's bad. Or the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spin around and I'm going to judge damage into the rogue. Like that's my plan, because you can do both of those theoretically simultaneously if you're not silenced. No, bad idea, because he might be Cloak of Shadow. You need to be very conscious about that. But yeah, so you want to turn and face the rogue. This might involve a very violent use of your mouse. And then, so that whole process will take about a second, but then of course the next thing you want to do is manually click on the rogue and tell your character to start auto-attacking the rogue. Maybe the other option is that we can make macros so that even though I'm silenced and I'm clicking an action and it's not doing anything, I'm still telling my character to start the auto-attack, right? Like I could be clicking Judgment while silenced, and I could have a macro that says /start-attack /cast Judgment, and at least my character will start the auto-attack, so I could theoretically jump up, spin around, and then start the auto-attack. I haven't gone that far yet in my dueling videos, so you'll notice that every time a rogue opens up on me, and they will open up on me multiple times in the fight, I'm not auto attacking initially. I'm actually just trying to turn around and just face the damn rogue, which is easier said than done in a lot of cases. If the rogue stuns you at first, though, let's get this flipped around. If the rogue stuns you at first as part of his opener, then you have all the time in the world. You just click the rogue and say start auto attack on the rogue. Thank you very much. And then you can turn and face them, and your auto attack will be going no problem. There's also, of course, again, the possibility that you don't want to be auto attacking the rogue. It depends on what type of rogue we're talking about here. But of course, the first thing you want to do is turn and face the rogue. The rogue will more than likely use one of their evasions, and there's going to be a long period of time where you and the rogue are just fighting each other. If you're a Holy Shock Paladin, what you use your Holy Shock on is kind of dynamic, is the best way to describe it. So, generally speaking, if you don't have very many wound poison stacks on you, let's go back over here. If you don't have very many wound poison stacks on you, like you got 1 or 2 stacks of wound poison on you, then it's worth your time to use Holy Shock to heal yourself. If you've got anything more than like 2 stacks of wound poison on you, then it's probably more worth your time to use Holy Shock offensively into the rogue, especially if they don't have the sole exception to that, of course, being if Cloak of Shadows has been recently activated. You don't want a Holy Shock in a Cloak of Shadows. The reason for this is because in plus healing gear, which I have a whole video on why you should be wearing plus healing gear on any spell power based paladin, whether or not, if with the sole exception of I'm a Holy Shock Paladin, I'm going to try to burst something out of existence and I don't care about anything else, you should be wearing plus healing gear on any Paladin with the sole exception of that burst Paladin. Just because you heal more and you do just a virtually identical amount of damage is kind of retarded. So your Holy Shock, the difference will be you can heal yourself for 2,000 normally, or you can do like 1,350 damage to the rogue. Well, if you got 5 out of 5 wound stack poisons on you, well, then the healing is only 1,000 for you, or you could do 1,350 damage to the rogue. And you can start seeing why it becomes a little dynamic as to whether or not you want to Holy Shock the rogue, or if you want to heal yourself with it. My suggestion, however, is that the first Holy Shock be used to heal yourself, and then virtually every other Holy Shock after that be used offensively, with the sole exception of maybe there's a Cloak of Shadows involved, and you can debate whether or not you want to do that. The other thing you totally want to use Holy Shock for is keeping the rogue in combat. So if the rogue, like, stuns you or more like stuns you, and he got like wound poison or some shit on you, and then the rogue either sprints or whatever, or God knows what he uses, but he runs out to like the 25-yard range. So rather than doing that 15-yard range shit where they're just regenerating their energy and they're trying to get a free stealth, there we go, they'll run all the way out to like 25 yards and do the exact same thing in stealth, and then shadow step right back on top of you and like sap you and shit like that, right? As they're running away from you, it should be painfully obvious what's going on, especially if they haven't used sprint or vanish. As they're running away from you, this is also a very kind of a big deal. You should be saving your Holy Shocks predominantly for this moment. So around about the time like they're at 20 yards or so, you should be coming out of the stun, and then you just turn and start chasing after them, and you want to see if you can bitch slap them at range with a Holy Shock or not. And if they haven't used a sprint, or they haven't used a Cloak of Shadows to try to avoid this type of scenario, then you're easily going to be able to keep the rogue in combat with your Holy Shock. And then it's just a matter of time of you continue chasing down the rogue to try to get them within judgment range, if at all possible. Grenades become extremely useful here. What becomes even more useful here, but they're not available on the Endless Private server, is Discombobulator Rays. Discombobulator Ray the rogue. It slows down their movement speed. You can easily catch up to them for a judgment. Odds are about the time you get within judgment range of them, they'll just shadow step right back into you, or they're forced to use a vanish. You're forcing the rogue basically to use something, right? Do not give a rogue an easy time of re-stealthing and getting their energy back. So you holy shock them to keep them in combat. You're now chasing them down to get a judgment onto them. Maybe you discombobulate or raid them to slow them down as well. This will absolutely force the rogue to use a sprint or a vanish to get back into the stealth. If you see that happen, then yeah, you just stop what you're doing and start healing yourself. No big deal. But force them to use something in order to get back into stealth. Don't let them do that shit for free. As an Argent Defender Paladin, yeah, they can run 1,000,000 miles away from you perfectly fine and then get back into stealth without you doing anything about it. Usually they're dicking around at about this range, and then you free them and you turn and you start chasing after them, try to get them within judgment range, throw a grenade or something like that, or use a discombobulate array, which I can't use on Endless private server, but just force them that there is no free re-stealth. Is the moral of the story here. And to give you an idea of what a punishment looks like, if they really wanted to get the free re-stealth, they'll just keep running like about 1,000,000 miles. So you might come out of the stun when they're over here, and they just keep running. The answer to that is you don't even bother chasing them, and you just start healing yourself, right? So it's like, yeah, they get the free re-stealth, but you'll heal yourself back to full. The other thing that you're going to want to do as a Holy Paladin, which or an Argent Defender Paladin, basically a Paladin that doesn't have Holy Shock, is if they're running this far without using Vanish or Sprint in this direction, it behooves you to put in like a Holy Light to yourself, and then you as the Paladin start running in the complete opposite direction. Because when you're running in the opposite direction, you put down like a consecration, like right here, and then you run a long distance past the consecration. Again, it's 25 yards for their shadow step, right? So wherever you centered the consecration, you're going to want to run at least an additional 25 yards from that location. Probably less, because it is an 8-yard range. So yeah, about 20 yards, maybe a little bit more. Just keep running a bit from where you're consecrating. You'll see it in some of my dueling videos. I put down a consecration, and then I run for like 20 plus yards. And then after 20 plus yards have gone by, I'll sit down and I'll start eating and drinking. And what this forces the rogue to do, since they decided to run 1,000,000 miles in the other direction, is it forces them to use a sprint in order to catch back up to me. Otherwise, I'll gain back metric shit tons of health and mana, because they have to walk around this stupid consecration circle before they can shadow step and sap you and all that stuff. So also kind of an important thing. So again, make sure you can punish their re-stealth. This was something I was absolutely not doing against this rogue over here named Prophets, and the duel was extremely difficult for me because of that, on top of the fact that he was using T. Notice I haven't really talked about T. I'm not really sure how to deal with T yet, especially as like a Holy Shock Paladin, but in theory, how do I explain this? In theory, if the rogue is using T, right, Thistle T, what is the combat scenario? Are they doing this in arena? No, not to my knowledge. Are they doing this in duels? Well, if they are, they're cheating, and that just automatically means that you get to start using potions, like Restoration Potion, Healing Potion, Whipper Root Tuber, or whatever the TBC equivalent of a Whipper Root Tuber is, right? You get access to all that crap. Lip Potions are also very useful under those circumstances. So if you see them T, you can lip immediately, and the rogue will just kind of cry a little bit as you heal yourself for free and completely waste their T. If you're in the open world, then you actually absolutely have to expect the rogue to use T. But if you're in the open world, it's so easy for you to find the nearest mob and to aggro it, so their blinds no longer become viable. And if the rogue can't use their blinds, then they could have like 4 or 5 Ts, and they'd still have fucking problems trying to kill you. So in open world, it's not that big of a deal. If you're in battlegrounds and they're using T, and you can recognize that they're using T on the opener, T basically lets the rogue force out a bop or a bubble without using a blind, which means that you're in a really bad position as a rogue. If it's in battlegrounds, probably the best thing you can do is like bop or bubble and just run the fuck away, like try to run to some friendlies. And try to combat it with that. That's assuming you don't have like Restoration Potion or all the other crap that you could possibly use to counter the situation. There's also some trinkets that might be really useful for dealing with that, but I'm not entirely sure. Should be, because I think most of the situations where you're like there are some trinkets and items that could be used to counter that are screwed up by Cloak of Shadows. So if I go back over here, Cloak of Shadows is like it's to remove all existing harmful spell effects and increase your chance to resist all blah blah blah. It does not remove effects to prevent you from using Cloak of Shadows, which means like silence and all that crap. But at first I was thinking like, man, maybe you could use trinkets to put like a poison on the rogue, or you can use a trinket to put, it does say spell effects, so maybe that it doesn't remove poisons. That might be interesting. So there's a poison in Classic WoW that ticks like for every second. It's like a trinket, right? It's like some kind of web poison or some crap like that. And if you hit a rogue with that, they can't re-stealth, and if they can't re-stealth, then there might be something to do there that allows you to counteract Thistle Tea. But generally speaking, a restoration potion popped at the right time would completely fuck over a Thistle Tea Paladin. I think even a lip potion would completely fuck over a Thistle Tea using rogue. There we go. I was saying Paladin there for a second. Okay, so we've talked about rogues doing bullshit things where they're trying to play this game or they're trying to play that game against Holy Shock and what you should be doing against it and blah, 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 blah. As a general rule, when you're fighting a rogue, there's going to be very, very long time periods of time of toe-to-toe fighting with a rogue in TBC. You need to have Consecration down at all times. You need to if you're not using max rank, make sure to use whatever down rank is appropriate. You need to be judging damage into the rogue constantly. You can't really be doing anything else. You can't really judge because Cloak of Shadows will remove any other thing that you're trying to do that's creative, right? Like Judgment of Justice or Judgment of the Crusader or Judgment of Light or any of that crap. So you just have to judge damage to them like SOR style. One second. I think I'm going to... There we go. Burping. You just have to keep judging damage into them. You have to be very conscious of when you're judging, though. You can't really spam it too well because you might judge into a Cloak of Shadows, and that's kind of a big no-no. Throwing stuns, you have to be more conscious aware of that you can't throw that into a Cloak of Shadows. It should be noted, I have these two right here, which are real dicks. It's like, how long does it take? I want to ask you this question seriously. How many stuns do you think you're going to get on a rogue? And it's like, okay, well, the first stun you throw at the rogue, they can PvP trinket. And then in the amount of time, and then they're going to have 2 Cloaks of Shadows that they can use before they get their PvP trinket back up again. And then they're going to have a PvP trinket back up again. So it's kind of like, how do I explain this? In the first 2 minutes of a duel that you're messing around with a rogue, he has access to 2 PvP trinkets and to 3 Cloaks of Shadows, right? Because 2 of those are front-loaded, and then everything else is just a matter of 2 minutes, right? So you're gonna have to deal with 2 PvP trinkets and 3 Cloaks of Shadow within the first 3 minutes of fighting first 2 minutes of fighting a rogue. This makes it extremely difficult to get an effective stun on a rogue where you can actually heal. But after those 3 minutes, or after those first 2 minutes are up, things become extremely predictable as to whether or not you're going to get the stun off, right? Because he doesn't have a PvP trinket anymore. All you have to worry about is Cloak of Shadows. It's very easy for you to track whether or not Cloak of Shadows is on cooldown or not, blah, 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 blah. So it becomes very viable for you to stun the rogue and then to get some holy lights off. This is more so true if you have lots of points in prot. Like if you have the improved stun, like if you have 35-second stun, right, then it becomes very easy to stun the rogue and get some heals in, stun the rogue and get some heals in. But if your stun is on like a minute cooldown duration, it's just really hard to get past the 2 PvP trinkets, if that makes any sense. Because you go to stun the rogue, he PvP trinks it, and then maybe you whiff the Cloak of Shadows, or you don't whiff maybe you whiff the next one on a Cloak of Shadows. Or you're forced to bubble before you can use the stun to heal yourself. Like, in other words, he Cloaks of Shadows, so you can't stun him. Those 5 seconds are enough that you can't wait for the stun. You have to bubble, so you bubble, and then, of course, he gets a full reset on you. And so it's just nasty. It's really hard within the first... All I know is that I cannot rely upon my stuns to be used for healing purposes within the first 2 minutes of dueling a rogue. Just forget about it. When you get really, really good at dueling rogues, maybe you can weave in the ability to stun the rogue and get some heals in there. But for a long time, you just assume it's not going to be happening, especially on private servers where there's a lot of cheating that goes on. The sheer act of casting my stun causes Cloak of Shadows to activate and negate it, which is incredibly fucking annoying. Keeping track of the vanishes might be a big deal. I mean, getting out of vanish is kind of okay. The big things to try to get out, however, are sprint and then to realize when the rogue is completely out of evasions. However, I think evasion is on a pretty short cooldown. Let me check. It's on a 5-minute cooldown plus prep. Yeah, so once they run out of evasions, things get really interesting really fast. I know that much. What the hell do I want to... Okay, so the reason why keeping tracks of sprints is important and trying to force out as many sprints on the rogue as possible. That's why if the rogue is going to play this stupid game, I'm going to run at him and punish him for it, which is going to force him to play this game rather than this game, and in which case I'm going to run the complete opposite direction as a Paladin once I come out of the stuns, and I'm going to put down a consecration, keep running, and then stop and start eating and drinking. The whole thing I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to force out sprints, because once the rogue is completely out of sprints, it becomes very difficult for them to stop you from eating and drinking as the Paladin. And that's kind of a big deal for you. Otherwise, you're going to go and you're probably going to die to the rogue just from pure oomage of them resetting the fight over and over and over and over and over again. All right. Okay, so the summary of the duel basically is that for the first 2 minutes of the duel, for about the first 2, maybe 3 minutes of the duel, you're doing everything in your power just to not die to the rogue and to try to mitigate as much damage as possible from the rogue, while at the same time trying to put as much damage as possible onto the rogue, if that makes any sense. You're in a kind of a pure survival mode for the first 2 to 3 minutes of the combat. During those 2 to 3 minutes of the combat, you might be forced to use one or even both of your bubbles. Ideally, you only have to use one, but it's possible you might have to use both of your bubbles. Personally, the way I've been doing it is I'll use like one bubble and then maybe my PvP trinkets. And that kind of saves me so that I don't have to use my second bubble, but, you know, you're just trying to survive. And what you're trying to out-survive is the evasions, specifically the evasions. Because once the rogue runs out of both of his evasions, they can no longer sustain a toe-to-toe confrontation with the Paladin. So your damage goes up significantly because they can't do any more evasions anymore, and it's really tough for them to force out any bubbles or bops by going toe-to-toe with you. What else is there? Try not to bop or bubble unless you get a blind. If you're finding that you have to bop or bubble before the rogue has blinded you, this is almost a guaranteed sign that the rogue is teed somewhere. Rogues can have macros that make it very difficult for you to tell whether or not the rogue is teed. I imagine we can also have macros that'll make it very obvious to us whether or not the rogue has teed. But if the rogue is forcing out a bop or a bubble from you before you manage to get a blind, the situation either better be that the rogue has teed, or the situation had better be that, actually, not even a better be. The situation is that you're fucked. So if the rogue is able to force out a bop or a bubble from you before you're able to get a blind out of the rogue, you're completely screwed. The one situation where this is not true is if the rogue has teed somewhere between point A and point B. If the rogue does tee on you, and you have an add-on to track whether or not the rogue is teeing on you, or you just have a sixth sense about these things, or you can just look at their energy bar and just know for a fact this rogue is fucking teed, it should trigger an instant bubble or an instant bop from you. Do not even let them chunk your health down too terribly much. Just instantly say nope, and then bop or bubble that shit. The reason for that is because you're better off bopping and bubbling at like 40% life and then healing to full, then then trying to I don't know, stick around and do more damage to the rogue and bop or bubbling at like, 5% life instead. Just because what'll happen is you won't be able to heal yourself to full inside the bop or the bubble otherwise, so you might as well just pull the trigger on that bop or bubble immediately if they've teed. Okay, what else do I need to talk about? Yes, if the rogue has teed, especially if it's like a duel or so forth and so on, then you immediately need to start thinking to yourself as a paladin that, okay, well, I'm using potions now. I'm going to use a lip potion. I'm going to use a healing potion. I'm going to use whipperoot tubers. I'm going to use a restoration potion. I'm going to do just about whatever the hell it takes to survive because the rogue wants an authentic PvP experience with no holds barred. Well, that's what a rogue is telling you when they tee on you. That they're telling you that I want to act like this is world PvP. Let's fucking go. So you, by God, act like world PvP and give it to them. You should be able to trade. It should be okay for if the rogue tees on you and you bop or bubble immediately and then heal yourself to full, and then you're using things like a lip potion or a restoration potion. You should be perfectly fine. Those should be an even trade. Believe it or not. I can't test this on the Endless private server because the only potion they really have available for me to drink is health potions, and health potions are the one option that you really don't want to use against teeing rogues because they usually have a wound poison on you. You're much better off using a lip potion or using a restoration potion. Assuming restoration potion still works on blinds. Blind is physical now, so it might not even work on blind, which would be kind of interesting. In which case, lip potion would be 1,000,000 times better because I imagine lip potion would also remove blind and make you immune for 6 seconds, which allows you to get in, like 2 holy lights, for example, which is like win-win. So the moment a rogue pulls out the Thistle Tea, just know that your reaction should be immediately to bop or bubble. The other thing that should be noted is what kind of trinkets you should be using against a rogue. That's more of a dueling question, right? Because under any other PvP circumstance, you're going to be using whatever trinkets you're going to be using. You know what I mean? A good time to use a PvP trinket is basically if they open on you with like a 6-second stun, right? Just trinket that shit off, turn, face them, and go from there. Other than that, there's not really a good place to use a PvP trinket. Maybe you could trinket away blind. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that. I haven't tried that yet. I use completely different trinkets in my videos, more because I'm an Argent Defender Paladin. Let's see here. Remove all movement and pairing effects and effects that lead you to control your character. Yeah, so you might be able to trinket off a blind. And if you can trinket off a blind, that's also a really big deal. And probably should... I think that would be a bigger deal for a Holy Shock Paladin than an Argent Defender Paladin. Yeah, so you just trinket off one... No, you don't want to trinket the blind. I'm trying to think about this. So this is more of a nuanced question than you would think. Like, do I trinket the blind or do I not trinket the blind? And the reason for that is because... let's say you're 10% life and you get blinded, and the rogue's over there bandaging, right? If you trinket that blind, there's like a 90% chance that you're not going to kill the rogue. At best, you're going to get like a judgment damage on the rogue. The rogue isn't going to die. You might go for a Hammer of Wrath on the rogue, and then the rogue will immediately vanish. There we go. The rogue will vanish. So, at best, you traded PvP trinket for a vanish. And then the rogue is... you might get a little bit of healing in on yourself, maybe like a holy light. And then the next thing you know, you're going to get sapped, and then the rogue is going to start healing up right next to you. So again, you're better off just bubbling. So the idea here with the PvP trinket, I imagine, is you get out the first blind from the rogue, and then you trade it for... let's get this going here. So the rogue uses blind, and then you exchange it with bop, okay? And then there's more fighting and a bunch of other stuff that happens, and then eventually the rogue blinds you again, and you look at your life totals, and you're like, okay, do I trinket this blind, or do I bubble instead? And odds are good that because the rogue still had evasion, because it's got 2 evasions, right? So this was evasion fighting 1, blind for bop. And then evasion fighting 2, blind for bubble, right? Or maybe it's the other way around. Okay, well now you still have your PvP trinket as a paladin, and the rogue, actually, yeah, you might, in that case, you might want to use PvP trinket earlier for like a 6-second stun, because you'll have it back off a cooldown, but by the time you need it for the 3rd blind. So use PvP trinket predominantly for the 3rd blind, because now under these combat situations, the combat situations that we see here, the rogue no longer has 2 evasions. Still burping over here. All right, so this is actually the combat situation. The rogue, you don't have any bubbles. The rogue doesn't have any blinds. The rogue doesn't have any evasions. You're going to beat the living shit out of this rogue. Especially as if you're a Holy Shock Paladin or you're an Argent Defender Paladin, you're going to beat the crap out of this rogue. But he's still going to have a blind up very, very soon. And smart rogues will recognize that they're kind of up shit creek without a paddle. So they might let you get your mana back to full. They might let you heal to full, and they'll literally be stealthed, like eating somewhere, so that they get full life. And they're kind of dogging you, knowing that you don't have any bubbles, but they also know that your bop and bubble probably aren't coming back for a long period of time. And what they're really waiting for is for their to be able to attack you in a toe-to-toe, and then to have another blind, and they blind you, right? That's what they're really waiting for. But if you have your PvP trinket, then you can PvP trinket away this 3rd blind. And if you're able to PvP trinket away that 3rd blind, then the rogue is up shit creek without a paddle. You basically won the duel at that point. So just be conscious of what you're using your PvP trinket on. Like, are you using your PvP trinket? Don't PvP trinket away a blind if it just means you're going to have to bubble very soon afterwards anyways. I guess you could get a vanish out of it. That's kind of cool. Maybe you can get a sprint out of it. That might also be pretty good. But it's probably better off just used for like the first 6-second stun that you get hit with the rogue by. Trinket that away. And at a 2-minute cooldown with a 1.5 minutes between blinds, it should be perfectly fine for you to have a PvP trinket available for that 3rd blind, which should kill you, but instead it's not going to do fuck all to you, and you're just going to murder yourself a rogue. Now, I do not know how a deep rep paladin deals with a rogue in duels. I don't... How do I put this? If you're a deep retribution paladin and you're dueling a rogue, you probably need to be in full plus healing gear, and I'm not even kidding about that. If you're in full plus healing gear as a deep ret paladin, you probably stand a chance against a rogue if you play it properly, right? Like you have your PvP trinket, you have whatever the hell else you're going on. You're trading blinds for bubbles and pops and so forth and so on. You do have Repent to play with, which is kind of nice, either offensively or defensively as a paladin. But just know that if you're trying to fight a rogue in like your DPS gear as a deep rep paladin, you're going to get absolutely annihilated. I haven't tried this personally, but I just think in theory you're going to get obliterated. Primarily because you have to fight through these two evasions and then 2 blinds and a bunch of resets at first, and you just don't have the healing capability in between the evasion usages to keep yourself topped off and subsequently alive. If the rogue doesn't have any evasions, then the physical damage dealing paladin can probably cut them to absolute fucking pieces. But if they have evasion up, it's just not going to work. So the whole idea behind the plus healing gear is, can you outlast them and just judge damage them and all that stuff? And is Repent a viable substitute for Holy Shock or Argent Defender? At that point, you do have a 35-second stun, which will come in really handy for healing yourself. But if you don't have the plus healing gear, aka the ability to heal yourself, there's no point. So it's like all the advantages you have as a deep rep paladin are not advantages versus a rogue, unless you're wearing the plus healing gear. So it's like, okay, I have Repent, awesome. Now if you have plus healing gear, you can fucking heal yourself with that. or you can repent the target, get distance on them, heal yourself, start eating and drinking, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Force out a sprint from the rogue. All kinds of advantages right there. You got 35-second stuns, which means if you can last long enough to get past these 2 PvP trinkets and these 3 fucking Cloak of Shadows, then you can, like, start stunning the rogue every 35 seconds and healing yourself off of that. But you need the plus healing gear in order to heal yourself off of that. Also, like I said before, you should be looking for opportunities to do this, to cast to go for an FOL heal. Like, you auto attack the target, then you immediately start going for an FOL heal, and you're trying to get the rogue to kick you, because again, it's a lot of energy for a rogue to expend on a kick. That, or it's a double-edged sword because they let the heal go through. If you're a deep rep paladin and you don't have plus healing gear, then that option isn't available to you either. So, long story short is, I think if you're a deep rep paladin and you're trying to fight a rogue, you're going to have to get your ass into plus healing gear. The Argent Defender Paladin, which is the paladin that I'm using in the duels, he has four pieces of Lamellar set, and then which is a plus healing, it's pure spell power set. And then everything else is plus healing gear. Holy Shock Paladins should be in pretty much pure plus healing gear. I do have a video on healing gear in particular. It's titled, let's see, Why Wearing Healing Gear is Better. We can scroll down here to the details, and you can just basically see the difference. In one of these, I have 815 spell power, but like 1,850 plus healing. And then comparatively, the spell power difference is like less than 100, right? So, but then the plus healing is virtually non-existent. So the moral of the, and the reason for this, it has to do with like the MP5. You can see here that the MP5 is amazing up here, but it's dog shit down here. The main reason for this is because if you haven't seen any of my other videos, you just want a condensation of information. Let's find it over here real fast. I want healing, Holy Reckoning healing, yeah. Okay, so this is at 1700 plus healing, but as a general rule, I want you to notice that Holy Light healing efficiency, at least on the private server, is complete dog shit. It's like 4 to 1 MPH, and then if you have Blessing of Light, it goes up to like 5 to 1 MPH. Comparatively, the Holy Lights have a much better mana to heal ratio. This is kind of important because certain classes can bitch slap you with pretty decent mana efficiencies. Let's see if I can find it here real fast here. Is it stats and figures, or is it, I think it's like spells. Theory crafting, stats and figures, TBC, those are healing figures. I guess it's supposed to be right here. Yeah. So if you actually go around, because I got the mana levels and so forth and so on, the critical strike chances and blah, 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 blah. Enemy spellcasters are doing somewhere in the vicinity of like 6 to 1 damage to healing ratio, meaning for every 1 point of damage they're spending, that they're getting upwards of like 6 damage they're doing to you. So if you're trying to just live off of Holy Lights, what's going to happen is you're just going to and die, because you're not healing efficient enough. Yeah, your HPS is healing efficient enough, but your mana per heal is less than their damage per mana, and therefore you're just going to and die. If you wear the plus healing gear, again, you can watch the other video. If you end up wearing the plus healing gear, what ends up happening is suddenly your flash of lights become viable. The next thing you know, this critical strike chance that you have is also a big deal for your flash of lights. Like, it becomes viable because you're rolling the dice more and more on that. And the next thing you know, you end up getting like a 9 to 1 MPH healing capability. With like the 1800 spell power, 1700 spell power. We'll say 8 to 1 to be generous here. And basically what this means is you can start ooming people without ooming yourself. Like, you, how do I put this? Okay, if you don't have the plus healing gear, then you're forced to use Holy Lights. Holy Lights without plus healing gear are 3 things, okay? They're mana inefficient as fuck. They do not heal you for shit, which means they're god awful as far as tempo is concerned. And on top of that, they are very easily interrupted. Like flash of lights are much more difficult to interrupt, whereas holy lights are much more punished if they get interrupted. Like you're 75% of the way of doing a flash of light, and then you get interrupted, versus 75% of the way of you doing a holy light and getting interrupted. The holy lights are much more easier to punish. So holy lights without plus healing gear behind them are complete dog shit. You just don't realize it until you run out of mana and die eventually, right? The FOLs without plus healing gear behind them are not efficient enough from an HPS perspective. They're efficient enough from maybe a mana per heal perspective without plus healing gear, but they're not. They don't heal enough per second to make them viable in PvP. But if you put on the plus healing gear as a paladin, suddenly your FOLs become viable to cast as the majority, as the main source of healing for you. You can start getting all the benefits of their mana efficiency because of this. And the next thing you know, you're able to gear significantly differently and much more effectively, as you can see here, because you don't have to worry about your MP5 too terribly much. 50% health, heals, holy lights, 6-to-1 healing ratio, yeah. 12-to-1 mana ratio. This is... I forget what this is. Oh, right, because you're using a special healing weapon that has like a plus 200 healed each of these, and I was using a trinket that adds like another plus 100 healing effectively to the flash of light, and blah 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 blah. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, if you're fighting a rogue, you're probably still going to want to be in plus healing gear, believe it or not. It's the best mix of offensive and defensive capabilities. If you still want the judgment, if you still want your Hammer of Justice to be on a 35-second cooldown, then you can use 4-piece Lamellar, but the rest of your gear probably should be MP5 healing gear. You can feel free to look into other options for dealing with a rogue, but this is basically just what I've found to be most effective. Dealing with rogues as a Holy Shock Paladin, especially with PvP Trinket, is much easier than dealing with rogues as just about any other type of Paladin. But the Argent Defender Paladin can deal with rogues also pretty damn easy. Like, deep prop Paladins can deal with them super easy with Avenger Shield and all that kind of stuff and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so that's basically just the Paladin versus Rogue matchup. If a rogue is going wound poison and mind-numbing poison, then it's a little bit harder for you to heal as a paladin. Oh, that's one thing I should also mention is there's almost no good time for you as a paladin to cleanse yourself. If you have time to cleanse yourself as a paladin, then you probably had time to try to go for a flash of light and then to get kicked as a response. There's only a few circumstances where you're looking at the situation and you're like, okay, I should try to do a little bit of cleansing here. And that's usually a situation where if you get school locked by the kick, then you're missing out on a bunch of goodies. You don't want to get school locked, but you have some free GCDs as a paladin. Maybe you go for some cleanses. It's a little risky because cleansing is almost useless. Like it is beyond useless against a rogue. The only time I ever even think about going for a cleanse is if I'm specifically trying to remove either this or if I'm trying to get rid of the mind-numbing poison. But to be honest, you have like one chance to do that, and then if it fails, then you kind of have to suffer the consequences of it. But yeah, mind-numbing poison doesn't really change things all that much. It just means you can't heal yourself quite as effectively. It does, however, make doing holy lights virtually pointless. Like if you stun the rogue for 6 seconds, you can get off one holy light if you have a mind-numbing poison on you, or you can get off. But comparatively, you're better off going with 3 flashes of light in that 6-second stun. You will get off 2 of those flashes of light, no problem. The third one will get kicked, but again, being kicked is almost just as good as getting off the flash of light. So, well, minus the school locking, of course. Anyways, long story short is just try to be as efficient with your damage output as possible. So, for example, in the Argent Defender Paladin videos, I try to jump and turn and face the target. Then I try to like start my auto attacks against the target. Then I try to activate Holy Shield. That's the next on the list. Then after Holy Shield, I'm trying to throw down a Consecration. Keep in mind, I haven't judged yet, right? Then I throw down a Consecration, and somewhere in there I may or may not judge, because you can judge at any point in time, but you can't reseal at any point in time. And basically what I'm looking for, not judging so quickly, is I'm watching if the rogue is using a Cloak of Shadows or not. Like, am I going to be wasting this judgment if I throw it too quickly? And if the answer is no, then, you know, I'll throw the judgment whenever I feel like I can throw it, and yada, yada, yada. A really good time to throw the judgment without resealing is if they use evasion. Right? Like, if they use evasion immediately in the duel, like right out the word go, and they don't use a Cloak of Shadows, which is kind of pretty commonplace, feel free to throw that judgment damage out, but do not reseal it immediately. Get your Holy Shield up, get your Consecration down, because there's no real point. They've got like a, what the hell they have? They like a 90% chance to dodge or some shit at that point, so resealing is a low priority. But yeah, so just try to play as defensively as possible. Your first Holy Shock to heal yourself. The rest of the Holy Shocks you put into the target for damage. Yeah, that's kind of about it. PvP Trinket is your friend, but PvP Trinket it's really only useful for the third blind. Once the evasions are down, then that's when you can really start fighting a rogue good and proper. If you find yourself having mana issues versus a rogue, watch any of my dueling videos, and you'll notice that I'm putting down a Consecration. I'm running for a long while away from the rogue, and then I'm sitting down and I'm eating and drinking. There's other tricks you can do where you can bubble and eat and drink, but they can put you back in combat pretty easily. But it forces them out of stealth if they want to put you back in combat, so that's kind of cool. Just look for places where you can get drinks in, and your mana should be perfectly sustainable and very, very fine. Anyways, I'm going to end the video here. Should just about 80% of the information will probably survive over to Classic TBC. There's a lot of stuff that I don't have access to on the Endless private server to really put into the meta. Like, I desperately want a goblin, a discombobulated array, because I cannot hit fucking rogues with grenades to save my life. So the grenade will be like running, or the rogue will be running away like this, and I know they want to go for like a free reset, right? And all I want to do is just put the rogue in combat for a little bit longer. So a discombobulated array and then chasing them a bit would be nice. Even discombobulated arraying the rogue and then immediately going into healing myself would be perfectly fine, because at least they're out here for like another 10 seconds if they want the free re-stealth while I'm healing myself, or they have to run back at me and then shadow step on top of me and then start combating my ass again to stop me from healing. But yeah, leaving it up to whether or not I can hit a grenade at like a running rogue at a long distance away, it's just not reliable enough. And yeah, so, and there's also times when I could really use like a sapper charge or other engineering trinkets and so forth and so on. Maybe I should look into using a PvP trinket on my Paladin for dueling rogues, if it can actually be used to remove blind. But again, it's going to be the third blind that you're going to be using it on, not the rest of them. Anyways, I'm going to end the video here, and day is full, boys.